Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us in our Federal Government Contracting Webinar Wednesday series. We're kicking off the 2020 series by covering one topic for each month. So January, we are covering cybersecurity and CMMC. So thanks for joining us. All of our webinars are complimentary and they are all recorded. You can find the recording on our website and also on our YouTube channel, where we now have over 300 government contracting webinars. They are all complimentary. As a reminder, for today, we do not take questions at the end. So our speaker today is Jody Reed, and her contact information will be on some of the slides. So if you do have questions for her, you can contact her directly. A little bit about us. We do provide professional services for government contractors. We work with product companies, service companies, and software firms, helping them with anything from GSA schedules to proposal writing, business development, and compliance. A little bit more about us can be found on our website. We do have an upcoming event on Monday, February 10th at the Kennedy Center. The federal government agency that will be in attendance is confirmed, and that's the Department of State. You can register for the event or sponsor the event, again, by going to our website, clicking on the event section, and scrolling down to February 10th, and we hope to see you there. Our newsletter, which goes out every Monday, reaches now almost 17,000 subscribers, most of which are government contractors and some federal government. If you've got questions about pricing or want to participate, you can email us at the hello@jennifershouse.com email address. Okay, so I'm now pleased and excited to introduce Jody Reed to you. She's with McMahon, Welch & Learned. Their website is listed here on your screen. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Jody, and let you dig into the topic today of cybersecurity and CMMC.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just to also let you guys know, I am an attorney. I've been doing government contracts law for over 20 years, and before that I was actually a business finance manager and a contracts manager, so I've been in a lot of different areas within the GovCon space. My main practice area here at the law firm is all the, I call it the fun stuff, intellectual property, new things like CMMC, protecting intellectual property in the GovCon space, other transaction agreements, and other things like that. So, but I know you guys want to get into what CMMC is, so if we can move to the next slide. So before we get into what exactly CMMC, just a little bit of history. Up until the new DFARS clauses, which we'll talk about a little bit later, the only thing that was really applicable for protecting and cybersecurity was FAR Part 4.19, and it was applicable to small businesses, but not to COTS. And it required that you put FAR Part 52.204-1, basic safeguarding of covered information systems, in the contracts. And it's a pretty low-level thing with cybersecurity, and the consensus has always been that it is not doing a whole lot to protect the supply chain and cybersecurity within the DoD force. So last year, they got an idea that they would have something new, and it's called CMMC, which stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It is going to apply to all, and I do mean all, DoD contractors, potentially including commercial, and that one seems to be pretty positive. It will be including commercial. Whether it's going to be also applied to commercial off the shelf, that still seems to be some questionable. When is it going to become completely effective? Sometime third quarter 2020. Next slide. So why? According to the introduction to version 0.7, which is where we currently are with the CMMC, we had a version 3.0 that got issued last fall. We had a version 4 that got issued early December, and then 0.7 got issued in mid-December. And according to the introduction, there has been a theft of hundreds of billions of dollars of intellectual property due to malicious cyber activity, and this threatens the U.S. economy and national security. It is estimated that malicious cyber activity cost the U.S. economy between $57 billion and $109 billion in 2016. The expectation is that number has dramatically increased since those days. So what are they going to do to try and, what is really going to be protected with CMMC? The big push is to protect federal contract information, which is called FCI, controlled unclassified information, which is CUI, and then there's something else that DFARS refers to, which is controlled defense information. Next slide. So why now? The DFARS included 52204-7008 and 7012 in RFPs since 2016. The clauses required self-certification. According to many sources, the self-certification process has failed. Thus, CMMC was created in 2019 with an aggressive schedule for creation and implementation. And you see here, as I just mentioned, the dates that they've come out. Version 1.0 is scheduled to be released by the end of the month. The expectation is that it will make that schedule. One of the concerns is that this has been such an aggressive schedule that even though each of these versions has been out for public comment, the public comments are not being taken into account as the different versions are going to be. One of the biggest differences between CMMC and the DFARS clause is CMMC will require a third-party assessment organization, or what's referred to as a 3PAO, to review your information technology system and provide a grade that will determine what procurement you may bid on. This is going to be a starting point for every DoD procurement that is going to be issued. So what are some of the big differences between self-attestation and self-certification? One of the big differences is you're going to have someone come in and basically take a look at your IT systems and make a determination as to what level, and we'll talk about the levels in just a few minutes, your system protects and is cyber secure. One of the things that's going to happen with the independent assessments is they're going to have documented evidence. They're going to be, personnel will have to be able to speak to something that's called capabilities, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then the capabilities will have to be fully demonstratable. This is a huge sea change from being able to say that your self-certification is that it's going to be self-certified. In the near term, it is expected that the 7012 requirements and CMMC will be coexistent. In other words, you may have to actually meet the requirements of 7012 and meet the certain requirements under the CMMC, and those requirements potentially could be different. Sometime going forward, there is a chance that it is going to be one version, or that they will be able to have that be a combined requirement, but at the near term, that is not going to happen. There are a couple of other DFARS clauses that can be applicable to cybersecurity. There's 252, 246, 7008, which is a new requirement regarding sourcing of parts. And by the way, the supply chain issues is one of the driving forces with the cybersecurity. And what's going to happen is it's going to put the supply chain responsibility on the contractor, and there's no exclusion for commercial items. And I'm not going to go into a discussion of the difference between commercial and COTS, but I recommend that you can look it up in the FAR and the DFARS to see what that delta is. Another clause is 252, 246, 7007. If you are subject to the cost accounting standards, you are required to now have a risk-based electronic part detection and avoidance systems covering 12 key areas. If you are non-compliant, the contracting officer can withhold payments. And finally, there's 252.204-7009, and that clause minimizes the ways in which a contractor, when they're assisting the government, can use information about a cybersecurity breach report. And then the contractors must vouch the employees, and they must have the employees sign NDAs, and the company itself also generally signs the NDAs. Next slide. So what's the timeline? So as I indicated earlier, the final CMMC is to be issued by the January of 2020. They're planning to have an accrediting body established by the end of January 2020. My understanding is that body has been established. and there is currently 7 working groups that cover scope, governance, commercial standards, adjudication, organizational structure, CMMC change management, and budget. The schedule is actually going to allow 6 weeks for the companies, the C3PAOs, to be accredited to do the evaluations and do the audits. Those audits are supposed to begin around the beginning of June 2020. Mid-June, the initial CMC RFIs are scheduled to be released. Previously, this was scheduled for September 2020, and instead now it's expected that the first RFPs with the CMMC requirements will be issued in September of 2020. Next slide. So what does this model look like? The framework consists of 3 areas: domains, capabilities, and practices and processes. The key sets of domains are the key sets of the capabilities for cybersecurity. The capabilities are the achievements to ensure cybersecurity within each domain, and the practices and processes are the activities required by level to achieve a capability. Version 0.7 has 17 domains, 43 capabilities, and 173 practices across all 5 levels. What do we know now about this? Right now, certification, one size does not fit all, which explains why we have 5 levels. The auditors for levels 4 and 5 are going to require more training. The certification, as we understand it currently today, will be required upon the award of a contract, although I am quite certain the RFP is going to require you to describe how you are your certification. The RFP must include the certification level, and this is a required flow down to all subcontractors. The question has been raised a number of times how far down the subcontract and supply chain it has to go. We have heard all the way down to the original OEM parts, but then of course the question becomes what happens if it's a cost item. The practices and processes. The practices are described as it measures the technical activities required to achieve the compliance, and the processes measures the maturity of a company's processes. Next slide. So this slide, this is actually from this is actually from a presentation that was done by Ms. Arrington, and it describes kind of in a way of how the different things. So you see the 17 capability domains, and kinds of things you see is like access control, and that is who has access to your system and how can they access it. Things like passwords and so forth like that. Awareness and training, situational awareness, personal security. Can somebody badge into your space, or can they just walk in? All these things are looked at individually. Then you have the different practices and processes. And if, say, for example, you have a level 2 intermediate cyber hygiene as your practice, but you have a level 3 managed process, the expectation is, our understanding is that you will only be able to be a level 2 at that point. So it will always drop to the lowest level that you have met. Next slide. So there's 5 levels. The most basic cyber hygiene level is it requires mostly of the 52201-21 requirements. It's got 17 practices. All, and I do mean all DoD contractors will have to meet level 1 to be awarded a contract. If you do not have the third-party assessment saying you meet level 1, you will not be eligible to win any contracts once this is implemented going forward from DoD, Department of Defense. Level 2 is intermediate cyber hygiene, and it relies on NIST SP 171R1. There's 48 practices, and it introduces the process maturity dimension of the model. 3 is good cyber hygiene. It has 45 practices with 14 others. You have to have effective implementation of the controls that meet the security requirements of NIST SP 800-171 Rev 1. This is the first one that allows access to controlled unclassified information. A level 3 organization is expected to adequately resource activities and review adherence to policy and procedures, demonstrating management of practice implementation. Level 3 is basically the same, is to a very large extent equal to the DFARS 7012 clause requirements. Level 1 is the very basic stuff, like I said, passwords on your computer. It is expected that probably level 1 and level 3 will be the most required levels. Next slide. Level 4, substantial and proactive cybersecurity program. It relies on 800-171B, which is still in draft form. And this means you have the capability to adapt the protection and sustainment activities to address changing tactics, techniques, and procedures in use by advanced persistent threats. For process maturity, the organization is expected to review and document activities for effectiveness and inform high-level management of any issues. Level 5, which the expectation is in talking to other companies will ever actually go to level 5. This level is an advanced or progressive cybersecurity program. It relies again on 171B. It has a demonstrated ability to optimize the cybersecurity capabilities to repel APTs. For process maturity, the organization is expected to ensure that process implementation has been standardized across the organization. And what happens is, these are all build-ups. So you get level 1, you move into level 2, you move into level 3, level 4, and level 5. And the capabilities and the requirements build upon each other. They're not standalone, that you just go in and you say, okay, I'm going to try and go in and be level 5. Level 5 assumes you've met all the requirements of the prior levels. Next slide. So this is actually again from the version 7. So if you're going for 1, it's performed. Level 2 is documenting. Level 3 is managing. 4 is review. 5 is optimize. Basically, if you're going for level 1, it's just the practice stuff you have. It's not documented. What the hope is going to be is that companies that meet level 1 will actually work to at least go up to level 2 so that they do have a policy, they do have practices, and they have a plan. The concern is with commercial and COTS products is whether or not these commercial and COTS organizations and what level has to be flowed down. And the question is also going to become, which is still being raised, is if you're buying a COTS product and it's 3 levels down in the supply chain, does that, and you've been told, and your contract, your prime contract is at level 3, do you really have to have everyone and all your subcontractors throughout this entire supply chain be level 3? And the answer to that, I think, personally, is that it will not, that they will have to at least have a level 1, but it's going to depend upon the data that is being provided to them. Next slide. I want to give you a little bit of an idea, and I know this is a little bit of an eye chart of what happens here. So you have a capability, and this is capability CO15, and the capability is simply to grant access to authenticated entities. If you're going to meet level 1, you simply have to identify the information system users, process acting on behalf of users or devices. It's related to the FAR clause and the NIST 800-171 specific paragraph. The other process you have to do is the second one down there is authenticate or verify the identity, and you can see some of the other references. I would like to point out the third bullet under P1077. That is actually the United Kingdom Cyber Essentials, and that they've given you the references for where they have gotten, how they've established the standard. As you move up through the levels, if you go to level 3, for example, process 1083, you use multi-factor authentication for local and network access to privileged accounts and for network access to non-privileged accounts. The reason why you don't see anything for level 4 or level 5 is because there's no additional requirements that must be met in order to, if you're going to be under this particular capability. There were other capabilities that you would actually see level 4 completely filled out and level 5 completely filled out. And there's some of them you will see it as 3, 4, and 5, and there's nothing for levels 1 and 2. The current version 7, 0.7, is over 190 pages. So there's quite a bit of information there. The next slide. Some issues that need really to be still addressed with CMC. One, how will DoD determine the appropriate CMMC level for a particular contract? How long is the certification process going to take? In talking with current C3PAOs who do things like FedRAMP, it's going to depend on the level that you have to go. There's also a belief and a hope, quite frankly, that some of the other certifications will be able to be transferred over as opposed to starting from scratch. What's the duration of a certification? Right now, if you try and there's something called authority to operate, and those have to be redone every 3 years. Will this be a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year? How long will the certification last? What happens if a contractor disagrees with the certification level issued by the C3PAO? Can they appeal it? If so, to whom? Will the CMMC apply to grants, cooperative agreements, OTAs, commercial, COTS, GSA schedule, orders? We don't know yet. That's still a little bit up in the air. Next slide. Some practical issues. Who in the government is being trained and when will the training take place? That's a big concern. If there's no DFARS clause addressing CMC, how it will be implemented, we believe it's just simply going to be another possibly H clause, or it'll be a written I clause. If you have DFARS 252-7014-704-7012 in your contract, but CMC level is required is only level 1, and as we've said, level 3 is really more equivalent to 7012, what requirements are you going to have to meet? Big issue. Currently, there are approximately 300,000 DoD contractors. So what happens if you are not certified when your RFP is issued because there's just simply not enough auditors? What if there's a recompete and you're the incumbent? Could you protest the RFP because, notwithstanding the fact you tried actively to get someone to come in and assess your system, there just simply wasn't enough of them? Finally, who pays for the certification? Can you charge to a contract, or do you have to charge it to indirect pools? With small businesses, we've heard that they're trying to come up with a way that they do actually, the government's going to pick up the charge a little bit better, but we don't know how that's going to happen at this point. Next slide. So where can you find some more information on CMMC? I'm going to leave this up here for a second and talk about some things you can do now so you can copy this down. I strongly recommend that you check this website fairly often because it does actually have a lot of information. They're trying to put the information out there. So what can you do now? For one, look at your current contracts. Look at when they're going to be renewed. Look at when your options are going to be exercised. We understand that the government is not going to modify current contracts to add this requirement. However, they're going to possibly require that you be compliant whenever that there is a contract renewal. We're not entirely certain if that means an option renewal or if that means that you are going to have to do it if you just have to do a new competition. Once again, level 1, everyone's going to have to be. That's the minimum requirement. Level 3 is only going to have CUI or CDI data. Even if all you have to do is level 1, you should probably begin working on creating the documentation to achieve your level. You need to think about budgeting time, staff, and other resources to work towards your level. And you need to keep informed as to where DoD is within this process. Some other thoughts on this. Write your process and procedures in pure English. You want to think about how you're putting these in there. You probably want to start familiarizing yourself with the requirements and identify the areas that might represent gaps for your organization. You probably want to start setting goals to mature your organization. And finally, you want to probably reach out to other partners for help. And there's a lot, just Google it. There's a lot of people coming out and willing to help you. Next slide. Some last thoughts, and this is, by the way, I'm not giving legal advice here. This is a concern that I have. If you have previously self-certified because DFARS 252-204-7012 is included as part of your contract, and you have not met the NIST requirements, and now you have a C3PO come in and review your system, you may be providing the government with a prima facie evidence of a false claim. Therefore, I'm going to highly recommend you engage counsel before you engage the auditor. That way the assessment can complete under the attorney-client privilege, and you can control the dialogue with the government. One of the things about cybersecurity, and it's something that some people understand better than others, is that if you control the dialogue with the government, you have a better chance of having a good result. But also, cybersecurity is not a snapshot like an auditing system. It is a snapshot. It's not something that you get certified and you're done. It's an ongoing process. And it's not, and when they get the audit comes in, it's just a snapshot. And you shouldn't freak out just because you don't meet it at that point in time. The auditors will probably work with you to try and make sure that you do meet it. And last slide. This is my contact information. Please do feel free to contact me if you have questions. Email is probably preferred. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer.
Jody, great presentation. You always provide valuable information, and this was no exception. So thanks for sharing your knowledge and information with us. We know that we'll have to check back with you in the next 30 to 60 days to learn what is happening with CMMC. So thanks for the great information. If you guys have questions for Jody, please email her at jreed@mwllegal.com. And hope you'll join us for the rest of the month as we continue to cover this hot topic. Today's session has been recorded, and we'll hope to have that posted to our website and YouTube channel later today. Thanks again, everyone, and this concludes the webinar.
Bye-bye.